Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Forward Thinking Podcast. It's Chrissy here from CS2. Today, we have our guest, Julius Solaris. He's the VP of Marketing Strategy and Events at Hopin. And today, we're going to be talking about everything events, from online, virtual events, hybrid events, like what's the state of events now, especially for B2B marketers, and where are we going? And also, how do we operationalize this? Like, how do we create a strategy and operationalize in a way where we're really creating effective events that drive revenue? So welcome, Julius. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chrissy. Thanks for the opportunity. Very excited to talk to you today and to virtually meet your audience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I first found out about Hopin when one of our clients at CS2 Gong used Hopin for their conference. And that was basically right after the pandemic hit. And I think when Hopin was starting to get popular and come out as like this amazing solution to try and replicate that kind of experience that we had at conferences. That we all missed and we were used to. And so one of the things that I saw as a benefit is everyone was kind of looking to Zoom, but then we're all using Zoom throughout our days. And it's a very kind of, webinar-y type experience. But how do you take that even further and trying to replicate events? So for our listeners who don't know what Hopin is, could you just describe it briefly for them and what you all are doing at Hopin, what your mission is?
Oh my God, yeah. Great intro, by the way. You touched on some very, very key points for us, by the way, in terms of the experience of all of us attending virtual events since the past couple of years. And it's an interesting story, right? Because our founder, Johnny Bufferhat, he was confined in bed for an autoimmune disease for 2 years. And he was
Wow.
frustrated with the experience of webinars, right? But he still wanted to be in touch with his community and attend all these great events that were happening around him. And so he decided to build a platform that would take a different approach to the concept of meeting online, that would have some elements that we all feel when we are at an event in person, but online. And that I guess became the product feature that made Hopin viral to a certain extent. He went through to what we all went through
Mm,
later on, a few months later, because it was founded in 2019.
yeah.
Yeah,
Great
that
timing.
yeah, right. But then again, I mean, it's not like Hopin was the only virtual platform
Yeah.
at the time. There were a lot of other platforms back then. There were a lot of other companies that came from the event industry that quickly
Hmm.
created tools. Yet Hopin had something different. I feel that became kind of the virality of it, the ability to create a different experience. You touched on a very important point there. To create something that moves away from a webinar type of experience, from a kind of one directional type of event to a more participative, engaging experience where you're just like feel a little bit more immersed into what's happening. And
Yeah.
immersion is like a big deal, right? Because in this distraction driven environment where we are at home, you kind of start to miss out on opportunities to meet other people, to listen to interesting content, or to be entertained um, in a virtual environment. Therefore, yeah, that's the story. And then we went from a few people to almost 1,000 people, from a bootstrap company to $1 billion funded company in 2 years. So, yeah, it's a crazy ride.
It's an amazing story. It definitely stands out to me, like as I've been watching Hopin and all the success and yeah, like you mentioned in a short period of time, but I think it was a mix of seeing that market fit. Because I think for a while, being on the B2B marketing side and seeing that, you know, webinars just it's just like an old school, kind of tactic. And I think most people will sign up for a webinar and then just never attend because they just know, oh, it's just going to be like this PowerPoint presentation I'm being talked at and what's my incentive for going? So I think if we truly want to create these experiences where we're engaging the prospects or our customers, it needs to be something more than that. And but also on the flip side, one benefit that I see too is, events are really expensive, event production, in-person events. So if you want to maybe limit that to certain areas, but then still have events that maybe where anyone can join, or do a mixture of both, like hybrid events. I think it's really great. So you don't have to do these like huge road shows where you're going to every city, and some are amazing and then, some aren't. So I just see a ton of value with that. So before
You're
we
so
go in,
right. Yeah.
yeah, before we go into our questions, I want to just take one segue, but just I think for our listeners, you're working at Hopin now, but you have a history of working in events or in the event industry. So could you talk a little bit about that and then how that led you to running marketing strategy and events now at Hopin?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, absolutely. I love events. The events are kind of my life. Like they go hand in hand with my profession. I became a blogger when it was a thing. Like when it was hot to be a blogger. I had this purpose that I wanted to sort of build my uh, sort of financial independence blogging, and I did that failing for a few years. Then I kind of I got the gist of it and started a business. And I sold that business in 2019, which ended up being like one of the most read platform for event planners online. We did bunch of research. I've
Hmm.
always been amazed by the intersection of technology and events. I've been one of the first ones to talk about the use of hashtags in events. I'm that old, if you can imagine. So
Mm.
I've been also fascinated by the new challenges of social media and been doing bunch of research worked and looked at all the platforms out there from Cvent to Eventbrite to you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and therefore, I sold my business in 2019 to Skift, which is a great by the way, the website was called EventMB and it is called
Mm.
eventmb.com. And sold the business to Skift, large travel media. And I was like pacing out a new experience, and then a pandemic hit. And I was back in the driver's seat again and thinking entrepreneurially. We started a bunch of virtual events ourselves that ended up being among the most successful, I would say, that the industry has ever seen. We've had 6, 7 events with like 60,000 plus event planners
Wow.
participating, which, to give you a sense of the scale, it's probably 5 times the size of the biggest show that you would ever have annually.
Yeah.
So it's incredible audience. And that kind of changed a little bit my career. I kind of navigated away and started joining the dark side, as they call it, in our community, which is the event tech part. It was my passion. I always wanted to be involved with event tech at some
Mm.
stage, and therefore made the transition first to another company, Event Technology, last year February, and then ended up at Hopin. That's a short story.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that uh, that you have like this passion and experience, and then being able to now, market and evangelize something that you like really feel passionate about. I think is great. It's very rare that a marketer gets to be that person who is like, "Oh, I'm just, love what I'm selling. I really believe in it." But that just makes your job just so much easier and more fun. So, I think that's just such a and you have real empathy. You've been blogging about running events, producing them. You've been in that role before. So, when you have that understanding and true empathy of like who your buyer is and who's using the product, I feel like it just makes for better marketing and engaging those
I feel
prospects.
there's a wider trend here in terms of like like companies that are like adopting a different approach to marketing and like being closer to their community of reference, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not making it about me. I've seen probably 10, 15 people that transition from media or from some sort of influence in the community to marketing teams within tech companies. Is like, it's a very delicate moment to talk to this community as well. The amount of drama and
Mhm.
damage that has been done to this industry is just unbelievable. First to go, last to come back. That's how we say it, right? in terms of the event
Mm-hmm.
industry. It's been I've seen people that have worked 20, 30 years losing everything overnight. So it's not an easy moment
Mm,
to have a traditional
yeah.
marketing approach. So I feel more direct way to talk to these people is needed, and not just in events. I feel in many verticals. So yeah, I commend Hopin and all those companies, to be honest, even our competitors that did similar choices.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, So what do you think is like the state right now? What do you think is we're kind of in this still in a pandemic, but we're post kind of quarantining phases in most cases. What do you see is like the best type of event right now or the choices of events versus like in person or hybrid and online, and how do you kind of match those to like what the goal is for some event marketers who are maybe kind of scratching their heads like where do I go next or what should I double down in, how should I even plan? I think a lot of people are looking at FY22, how are we doing our planning, so where do you think we're at right now at this phase?
Yeah, I mean, being an event coordinator has been consistently in the top 5 most stressful professions in the world for 10 years in a row. I don't think it's getting any easier in 2022. If not, the amount of uncertainty is even more present. But like, I also equally realize that your audience marketing teams, event planners, they want to hear about solutions to this. And I feel talking about tangible, actionable things that you need to consider. There's never been a more fluid concept of what an event is than what we're seeing today. Like literally, you can have pre-recorded video, create conversations about it, and still call it an event, right? You can have, in person,
Yeah.
you can have hybrid. So I feel the best strategy today, it's what we call hybrid event strategy as opposed to a hybrid event. So let me define what a hybrid event is for those that may not
Sure.
necessarily grasp immediately the concept. Usually we refer to a hybrid event pre-pandemic, I must say, as like an event that is happening for an online audience and an offline audience at the same time. So in person and online. So a
Mm-hmm.
synchronous type of experience where the two audiences somehow are also called to interact with each other. So that has evolved,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. Yes, that's part of the mix. You can do that. It's especially important right now for that if you're in the US for that international audience that cannot travel, for example. The big inclusion
Yeah.
component in that paradigm. But like we're not chasing that at all costs. We feel it's about freedom of choice for your team, your audience, your event to choose the best tool that makes sense at the moment. And that could be in person, that could be a hybrid, that could be virtual. It's however, whenever, wherever it matters to your audience. That's how we like to see. So we, as a company, we like to be ready at all touch points and offer the best possible tool. Consider that you need to have an inclusive all-in-one type of strategy where at least like you have the tools that matter
Mm-hmm.
to sort of propagate that strategy and be flexible enough to change at the last minute. But it's transitioning also the meaning
Yeah.
of events, I would say, into more like touch points that you have through the year with virtual activations, for example, that culminate into a big
Mhm.
in-person meeting that is kind of keeps that homecoming feeling in a sense of getting together, right? That transition, that relationship
Yeah,
between virtual and in person is stronger than ever.
I love that. I like the kind of like figuring out that strategy of just virtual activations that could culminate in an in-person event. I think having those, that ability to kind of garner people's attention, but like you said, you talked about, you built a community before, but it's kind of what you're doing, you're finding ways to pull in people from different areas, build a sense of like community with Hopin or with your brand, and then take those people in that community and connect them together in this culminating event. And I think that's a really interesting idea, but like you said, being able to pivot fast. Like if you have to decide, okay, we're not going to do this in person, it has to be online or virtual. Um, Given we know that this pandemic has changed, and fluctuate multiple times. You never know what new law or measure is going to come out. But I think having a platform that supports that, and also a strategy that can account for that, I think is really smart and super important, and probably what a lot of event marketers are realizing they have to do. I think there's only so many um times where you can like put a deposit down for an in-person event and then lose that money.
Yeah, no, you're
And
100%
yeah.
right. I was witnessing a conversation about this in an industry event in person that I attended a couple of weeks ago, and about force majeure and these like contractual negotiate, which is a big deal for a lot of planners right now. Actually, the most attended session of the whole event was about contract negotiation and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So what came out of it is that you got to be intentional if you want to do in person. Like you got like if you make that
Mhm.
decision, you kind of have to be sure. Like you gotta go for it.
Yeah.
That's like CES did to a certain extent. Like despite everybody dropping out and the negative media, they still went ahead. Like you still have to do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of ethical questions. There's a lot of laws. So it's not an easy decision. But once you make it, you have to stand for it.
Totally. Yeah. You mentioned one thing too about inclusion, like including people from different countries. But one thing that I've also been thinking about recently is for the benefit of like a hybrid or giving people experience to be from anywhere is like also just inclusion for handicapped or abled people, like people who actually can't be there, or even to your CEO, he had an disorder, and like being immune suppressed. Those are all things that I think before we never really thought about. It's kind of sad that we didn't think about it, but like, how do we make our events also just more inclusive across the board, from where you are, what's blocking you from being there, even outside of a pandemic? Those things will still be there, it won't change.
Well, you're asking a very, very dear question. This is a topic I care about quite a lot. And to me, what happened from March 2020 was, in a sense, I like to call it the biggest advertisement that the event industry has ever had, because like we got to
Mm,
experience events that we could never attend before because we couldn't go there, we couldn't afford them, couldn't travel to it. Some countries didn't get the visa for it. You have to think about that. It's a
mhm,
nightmare. I've seen literally event tech platforms started just on the basis of someone's mother who couldn't travel to an event because of visa. So
mm,
there's these strong motivators. We still want to feel part of the community. So there's the short termism of thinking, okay, people, there's a pandemic, we need to kind of make up for it. So hybrid makes sense for that. Then there's the long-term vision, and the long-term vision is one of the radical inclusion, I like to call it, inclusion at all costs, right? No matter what,
mhm.
because some people cannot be there for any reason, because they have children, because they have stuff going on in their lives, and time does matter quite a lot these days. We're all realizing that. So, given that
Totally.
opportunity, it's incredibly important. I feel that I hope that that inclusion part is not only on the attendee side, but also on the sponsor side, on the speaker side, which has always been, we've all seen the manuals going around, the mail panels and all of that.
Yeah.
Personally, I made the choice, in all my events last year to not pick the usual faces, but like take that opportunity to really change the lineups, being more representative of an audience that it's kind of 80% female in our industry. So, and yet you see all these panels made of the opposite sex. So, what is happening there? So, I feel that that's a component of it. Sustainability is another component of
Mhm.
it as well. Talking about topics that matter. It's not like the sustainability crisis is going to go away. And hybrid events by research that has been just published are a direct way to cut waste and emissions by almost like
Mm, mhm.
50% of a traditional event. You have to think about some industries like the trade show industry being for some of the most wasteful um, in the world. So yeah, it's kind of it's a direct way to contribute to these important causes.
Yeah, I think both of those things. So, from a sustainability standpoint, I think it's really interesting because I think all these benefits people don't really think about. Like, we're always thinking about moving to hybrid or moving to virtual as this sacrifice. And it's like, well, actually, there's a lot of opportunities that can arise from it too. Like the sustainability point, but I used to go, to Dreamforce every year, and you see all of like the waste, and I've even been helping out when my companies have been a sponsor in the past, and you see what goes into it. There's a lot of waste, and everyone's combat was like, well, we're gonna give out like reusable water bottles.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that's one good step, but to your point, like actually having that hybrid approach or not enforcing that people need to travel there, fly, and all, it cuts that waste. It also potentially saves budget so they could do more marketing instead of having to pay for their teams to be there. But I think that's an interesting thing that I think not a lot of marketers think about. And then to your point on like manels or panels, I think that it's something that you saying that, okay, I have this ability to make that change and be an ally and decide, okay, we need to uh there's a problem, right? Like the stats don't line up. I think a lot of people, when they think, oh, we need an expert, they always think of a male. It's like, why do we do that? There's a lot of women that are experts in their fields, and but when instantly it's just the same kind of echo chamber of like people that get chosen. So I think spreading the word of how we need to have more representation
Yeah.
across the experts that we include in our panels, I think is
As
great.
marketers,
And there's been
yeah,
a lot more
sorry.
there's a lot more focus on that now.
Yeah, as marketers, as planners, we have a lot of power to decide who goes on stage.
Hmm.
So we used to use that power and like really understand the sort of biases, that are not necessarily, conscious biases sometimes, right? They're very unconscious biases we
Yeah.
have to dig deep to understand. And I've been battling my own. I've been like looking at my previous lineups and see like why did I make these decisions? Were there really no
Hmm.
alternatives to these lineups, or was I just being lazy and just operating in different directions? This is a wider topic, I guess, but still an important one because
Yeah.
the virtual opportunity leveled up a lot the keynote speaking circuit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think just like that added point to like being getting more speakers, like for some women, like they don't have flexible schedules. They maybe are a caretaker, they have kids, and so giving them that flexibility to not have to take like 3 days traveling somewhere and getting there, I think just alone creates more opportunities.
You're so
So
right. You're so right.
um
I mean, you gotta make it easy.
yeah.
But then again, I also realized
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that think, we're still in business. We're talking about making business events. In most cases, we're not talking about weddings, sports or whatever. Um, and planning a hybrid event feels like planning two separate events. Like, and it's not like one wasn't enough. You know what I mean? Like one was quite a lot to
Yeah.
do already. So you're asking us to do twice the work with half the team in some cases, which is what is happening right
Yeah.
now. And with crazy lead times and things that are changing, like this is a very delicate, not easy topic for a lot of people that really embrace all of what we discuss, but then they're faced with the reality, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we have a lot of people in marketing ops that listen to our podcasts, and I think when you talk about having like being low on resources and figuring out where you're going to support all those teams, like definitely feel the pain there, and they're supporting our event marketers too, and how do we best do that? So but I want to go now into kind of talking about human connections, because I think I one of our past podcasts too, we talk about the importance of creating like human centric touch points, especially in marketing. And I think that's where marketing is going, and I think we've always kind of seen more of that focus on the B2C side, but then now B2B marketers and forward thinking ones realize like that should be all of marketing, right? Like how do we engage the person? How do we create more human to human experiences. So, what are some ways that a platform like Hopin or a certain strategy can that you suggest could do that? Like, what are some examples?
That's a fantastic question, Chrissy. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I feel there's two things to focus on. So first off, I've been digging deeper in terms of what everybody said in the first 6 months of the pandemic, evaluating their virtual experience, and when they were saying like, "We're missing face to face, we're missing face to face. This is not the same experience."
Mm,
Why? I was asking like, what are we referring to when we say that? And
yeah.
to me, the answer was about a concept that we call what we call it's defined as liminality, or you can call it serendipity to a certain extent. And like when you attend an in-person
Mm,
event, you're attending a keynote session, you know what the next breakout session is going to be. So you have that schedule in your mind. But the walk that you do from the keynote hall to the next breakout session, that's where you go outside of your comfort zone in liminal spaces such as
yeah.
the corridor or the coffee break. And that's where actually the real magic of events happen. That's what you remember about an event. It's not the keynote speaker. It's not like maybe you will remember like a memorable quote, but what you feel in those sort of out of your comfort zone moments is where the serendipitous moment happens and you meet someone that you like or changes your business or life or whatever. And I feel that as a platform, we have a little bit of that. I feel that part of the virality of Hopin at the beginning, especially, was due to one module that I love. I attended an event from StreamYard, the company that we acquired last year. They do their quarterly meeting, which is fantastic. I really invite everybody to attend. It's just like made of creators, so it's so engaging and amazing. But I spent
Mm,
like an hour of it in our networking shuffle sort of part of the platform where you just click and you get randomly matched to attendees and you get 3 minutes to talk to each other and then you can extend if you like each other or just move on. And I met
mm,
so many incredible people and I spent so much time. I created connections, and that felt as I was in an in-person event, like introducing myself. Even better, because honestly, as an introvert, I don't go to people and like say, "Hi, I'm Julius, nice to meet." I can't do that. It's like forcing myself. So as an introvert, I have that ability now to do it on camera. We're a little bit more in control. So that's one element that I would definitely, find that liminal serendipitous moment in your platform, create breakout sessions, whatever it is, get people to connect in
hmm
different ways. The second part is literally about, the way you design your events. The platform has to help, but the way you design them is so important. And like thinking that we're humans, stressed, with kids, with stuff going on, with whatever noise outside that we have to take care of. There's always so much going on. And, I think there's a split of 50-50 in how you plan your events. One is content, 50 is content.
mm,
The rest of it is catering for us as humans. And those events that
mm,
do best, that really engage the audience, and engagement means success. Whenever you engage the audience, you're having a successful event. The correlation is there in our data. So, are those that do it's our all hands Friday meeting. I talk about that all the time. It's my favorite event of the week. It's a mandatory meeting on a Friday morning at 7 a.m. Can you think about anything worse than that? But I can't wait to go there. It's like and when there's holidays, I have FOMO. I really miss it because it's so fun. Like, it starts with music, everybody's in the chats, posting GIFs, and there's like everybody's dancing, and there's competitions, and there's, costumes, sort of whatever, show up in costume moments and Halloween parties, and there's always something happening. And there's the business update, there's the CEO speaking, there's the good news, the not so good news, everything is shared. But it's also like a moment for us to connect. There's sessions about mindfulness, there's yoga. So we have to really think about us as human beings. And that vanilla, high level, wishy washy, however you want to call it, level to some business minds. it's actually as important, if not more, sometimes that your content.
Yeah, no, I think that the same way that we look at engaging our employees, I mean even like our friends, our families, like I think a lot of people will like everyone at some point has been an event planner. If you've like had people over to your house, you've been an event planner. You just plan to have a gathering, people came, you let them know what time, you kind of set a mild agenda, we're going to be eating dinner or we're going to like play, watch something. Everyone has done type of event planning over a certain
What's your
age. And
favorite
so
event you
I
plan,
think
Chrissy?
I'm a big cook, so I love any kind of like dinner party and stuff like that. But now that I have a daughter, it's a bit harder, but I still, yeah, anything revolving around food. Maybe because I'm
Oh, you
Italian.
are? Okay,
So
we shared that, right? I'm Italian too.
yeah, so my mom's Sicilian. She came from Sicily. I don't even know if I've talked about that on the podcast before,
There you go.
but yeah, so
Maybe the Italian
we
nature is
have that
coming up.
European.
Easy, but like, what makes you feel good about that event is literally what matters the most. And like the food is important as a connector, but it's not about the food, right? It's about that feeling
No.
where everybody's sitting down and talking and having a glass and going through all of that. That's what makes us sort of vibrate as I guess as human beings, and that's what we remember. That's what we need to recreate in person, online, whatever.
Totally. And I think that I like how you say 50-50, that strategy of content versus the kind of human connection, because I think a lot of the time people go into the event with like 90 content and then, maybe we'll leave some time for like Q&A at the end or we'll do a breakout session, but we're not really 100% sure like what's going to be involved in that breakout session. So I think creating that engagement, using this time to actually um, entertain. I think sometimes we think also especially in B2B marketing, like, oh, this is serious. We're talking about serious business here. We can't entertain. But if you look at the most successful brands, that's what they're doing. They're entertaining. And then they still lead with good content. 50% of content, at least it's good content. And actually, I think that that makes it better because I think a lot of the times when we just try and fill content, we're just filling fluff or demos or something like that in our conferences, when really we have the chance to let people learn from each other, let people teach each other, like, oh, this is how I'm using the platform, this is the amazing success I'm having, but also this is my state, like, can you empathize with me? This is what my work life is like, I'm sure yours is like that too, and this is how I'm getting value. So letting everyone engage with each other takes that weight off of your team and your brand to really sell and educate and push that content. You're creating these experiences that are a bit more um, honest and genuine, but still gets you that same
So spot
effect.
on. I wish all marketers and planners would think the way you do, because that's exactly what it's all about. And we feel safer, right? It's a problem that it's
Hmm.
kind of a intrinsic with planning events. It's kind of a bad heritage of the event planning industry that I've been fighting against as a rebel for quite a while. In a sense that, what's the first thing you think about when you have to plan an event, right? You book a venue, and you find the speakers, and then whatever the rest is like, who cares? Those are maybe you have to sell sponsorships and
Hmm.
tickets, and that's what matters. But at the end of the day, what really matters is really the connection, the opportunity to get people together and connect with each other. And that's how we evaluate events. That's what research says, not what Julius says. We evaluate events by means of connection, not by means of information that we're getting. So
Hmm.
to think that the speakers do add, don't get me wrong. An event has to be an event. There needs
Hmm.
to be some level of novelty to it. Otherwise, it's just like, why should I turn up? I
Yeah.
can just go on YouTube and just like watch a video. So
Yeah.
you need to have that component, but it's not only about that. And we really have to uh, push the boundaries of our perceived comfort zone, because actually relying on speakers and choosing like a fancy venue, that's what everybody else is doing. And it's not like we
Yeah.
love that about events pre-pandemic. We're actually like frustrated about it in most cases. So yeah.
Um, 100% agree. I think you mentioned about like measuring engagement or being like a success point. How are you? Well, how are some of your customers doing that, or how is how's your team doing that, or what do you think is a good way to try and even like measure engagement? Because I know it's like in some ways it's a feeling you're creating those experiences, but is there a way through Hopin or any other ways that your team has defined as a great way to actually show or measure engagement with your audience?
So that's an amazing question. I feel that this is the opportunity for everybody listening, right? So we're entering a cookieless era where
Yeah.
understanding more about our customers is going to become increasingly more difficult. And as a result, though, we have this behavior on events in general, whether in person or virtual, where not only I'm sometimes paying for a ticket, but I'm giving you all the data that you need just for the means of
Hmm.
access to your content, to the people of that community. Not only that, once you're in the platform, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of data points within the platform in terms of your behavior, what sessions you attended, what documents you downloaded. And so all of a sudden you have this opportunity within a very sort of fragmented um, environment to own a lot of depth in your data piece that is actually going to help you to not only create more engaging programs, but also be more effective in marketing in general. So
Hmm.
that's the bare birth of a new category, I believe. There's virtual events as we know it. They've been around for 15 years plus, but what happened in the past 2 years, I keep on saying it, we've seen more development in event technology platforms in the past 20 months than in the past 20 years. We released hundreds of
Yeah.
features just the last year alone. So don't assume you know.
Wow.
Like, don't assume that if you check like a platform in April 2020, you know about it. Recheck everything because it's like completely different in a positive way. And therefore, what it means for engagement. I've been talking about engagement because this was an issue with in-person events. It's not something that started with virtual.
Yeah.
Um, and so trying to understand this, I wrote a book about it. Can you believe it? So, I've been digging quite a lot on the topic and looking at all the research. I feel that some of the features we're releasing over the next few months, I've been talking about for 15 years, like as kind of the way
Mm.
the future, maybe we would have tools like the ones we're releasing. So I'm I I don't even like I get the shivers even talking about the stuff that we're releasing in terms of engagement and analyzing and being able to understand what's happening. Um, until we do that, we have up to 40 reports available in terms of what's happening in your event. And we see that 85% of our audience, of our planners, spend time in the analytics dashboard digging deeper. Sometimes they hire extra talent just to look at that and make it strategic for the
Yeah.
business. And you have to think that this is an industry where 60%, like 40% of planners that I interviewed before don't even like look at data or don't even require data in the platform. So can you think about that? Like 40% of planners in general don't look at data, yet 85% of planners that use Opin do look at analytics. That's a major shift that is happening right now under our eyes.
Totally. And I think that we I for a marketer, like I think having the data to analyze, like there's two things. It's like figuring out ways that you can improve. That's like the best thing. Instead of just like, okay, we need analytics to just prove something. Okay, yes, like we had this event, it was amazing. We have this engagement. but also we always talk about on our podcast, like data for marketers is also your chance to improve or even figure out what's actually working, and that's data you should be pushing back into your own practices and your team. Don't just think of data as this like, oh, we're going to create a slide for our, our C suite and board to know like how engaging our events are. It's like, well, actually the data there can, like you say, can do so much with it. And it can even um educate like what you're going to do for marketing strategy. Like you said, like if you see certain sessions are getting more attendance rate, that means that those topics, are more relatable to your audience. You can double down on creating more content for that. If you see certain titles or people going to certain ones too, then you can really try to get a sense for like, okay, those are the pain points that those personas are dealing with. So like there's things that you can take from that data that not only can help your events and improve those, but like you said, really, help inform your marketing. Because you talk about research and you have a very research minded approach, which I love. But having that data and that data set and a big pool of people, especially if you're running a big event, just gives you something to work off of rather than just like, oh, I'm gonna try and come up with something that I think might work.
Totally. Yeah, and then I feel that the step that is required that the market is kind of screaming for in terms of our platform, every platform, event technology platform in general, it's kind of like the so what of data, right? So we
Yeah.
need to move away from vanity metrics that are just like clicks, whatever impression, and give like a more systematic framework to our customers to make the right decisions and understand really what's going on at their events. And I feel we're actually getting there. This is part of the beauty of being
Hmm.
at Hopin is that we're kind of starting a new movement in a sense of like the way we look at events, the way we look at this category. There's everybody kind of gets why events are great, but it's what I like to refer to an exchange of fresh air almost in most cases, right? You say that at like yeah, a great event, but yeah, but how? How do you measure that? How do you justify that to the business? Because it's expensive and it's a big deal. It's a pain in the neck to plan these big events, right? So yeah, if we can deliver that
Yeah.
tangibility, that's a whole different game.
Yeah. You basically answered what my next question was going to be, but I was trying to, for some event marketers listening or marketing ops folks, or anyone like VPs, if you are thinking about, buying a piece of technology to help you power your events like Hopin, you know it's good to have a list of kind of outcomes or compelling cases, so you can even track the effectiveness and go into it with a strategy. We always talk about it here, like technology, you need a strategy first and then technology to match that. Of course the technology can be like deciding how, you know, where there's limitations in your strategy. There might be less limitations if you find the right tech to support that. But what do you think for those marketers? And I will say, marketers, work with your technology team or your marketing ops person together, work together to make that decision, because I think both teams need to be set up for success to implement. But what do you think would be like a one of the best compelling cases or outcomes that they should go in to like an implementation or selecting a tool with?
Yeah, I feel that closing the loop with marketing and operations and work effectively as a team is like the number one sort of approach that you gotta have today as a team, being as cross-functional as possible. Because events touch on so many
Hmm.
points. There's so
Hmm.
more than just like one objective. Yes, I mean you need to have a main objective for your activation, whatever it is. It could be awareness, it could be direct sales, support, internal events, but like, yeah, I mean, that's present, but people perceive more when you show up at an event, right? It's so much more encompassing. And therefore, that's why there's a collaborative sort of approach requested at the beginning. Otherwise, you kind of end up in these I don't want to use like marketing jargon here, but it's the silos where you're thinking one way, but you're forgetting about that human connection, that serendipity, that engagement is actually going to represent probably the spark that is going to drive your strategy for the next few months, right? Because you see that from a
Mm-hmm.
customer that attended a specific session, some mega deal came out. So
Yeah.
being as open-minded as possible with our events programs. I mean, at Hopin, for example, we did an event a few months ago called Event Minded about mental
Mm.
health in the events industry. So, you know,
Mm.
this is how so transversal the conversation is becoming when it gets to, you know, our motto at Hopin is feel closer, because you know we feel
Mm.
that um, despite the availability of tools and we've never been as connected as we are, we still feel very very alone in this moment in time, and therefore the mission of these technologies and events in general should be to get people together and feel that closeness. That has to start within teams in cross-functional ways. Only then you're really mastering the tool that you have at hand. And it's not about features. You know, we don't play the feature battle. Like, you know, you got to find
Yeah.
platforms that do more than we do in terms of like specific subgroups that need to connect with like, even though like we're getting pretty specific too, but our sort of our strategy is about experience. It's about creating that feeling. It's almost like Apple versus, you know, Palm back in the days, right? It's just about, yeah, maybe we don't have all the features, but like the experience of being on that phone in 2007, that's a different game.
Yeah. I think a lot of marketing ops are and just marketers using like any MarTech, like doesn't loads of features doesn't mean more effective. I think in some ways it's like where do you start? I think when there's simplicity and when there's a, mindful approach to like, okay, these are the things that are really gonna be valuable for your audience and make them feel closer. If you have that intention, it's even sometimes a bit simpler to understand what the strategy is going to be. So, yeah, I think that that's really good advice. But we are out of time. I feel like I could probably keep talking about
No,
this for ages. I'm sure you can
same here.
too, Julius. But for those of you who want to follow Julius on LinkedIn, we'll be sharing his profile. He shares also a lot of great research and tips to his followers, and we'll link to Hopin's website as well. And yeah, for everyone thinking about how to create more, the human connection in your events, and um, definitely check out Hopin and check out what Julius is talking about on his LinkedIn. So thank you so much, Julius, for sharing your insights. I really enjoyed our
Thanks for
conversation.
having me, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Well, if you enjoyed this episode of Forward Thinking, feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you enjoyed the past few episodes, feel free to leave a review. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time on Forward Thinking. Have a good one.